Borders aren't as immovable as they seem. Picture this. A town celebrates Independence Day with flags and fireworks, but behind the scenes, most of its commerce, media, and even medical services quietly flow northward. Schoolchildren are more fluent in French than Spanish. Local laws frequently clash with national ones. And in hushed tones, people wonder, would life actually be better under the maple leaf? Across the northern United States, subtle fractures are forming. Economic ties, shared culture, and political discontent are pulling some states closer to Canada, closer than most are willing to admit. Could your state be entertaining the idea of breaking away? Stay tuned, because these 10 states might just be eyeing a new alliance, and the signs are louder than ever before. Number 10. Maine. You might assume Maine is too small, too quiet, and too far off the radar to make waves. But that assumption doesn't hold up. Maine isn't just neighborly with Canada, it's economically intertwined. With over $1 billion in annual cross-border trade and a 248-mile shared border, communities in Maine already rely on Canadian radio, television, and even cellular networks. This cultural crossover is real and undeniable. Yet here's the twist, rural Maine is hurting. Paper mills are shutting down, lobster exports are facing steep tariffs, young residents are moving away, and many towns are hollowing out. On the other side of the border? Subsidized healthcare, better infrastructure, and more generous energy programs. It's no wonder locals are beginning to ask, if the services are stronger, the trade tighter, and the culture already aligned, why not take the next step? Could Maine be the first state to flip? Because when a region feels more connected to Ottawa than Washington, you have to wonder, how long until it redrafts its place on the map? Number 9. Vermont. Vermont may look like a living postcard, picturesque hills, cozy towns, and everything maple, but beneath the charming exterior, a quiet shift is underway. This tiny state has deeper links to Canada than most people realize. Each year, Vermont sends over $150 million worth of dairy and specialty products north across the border. Cross-border festivals, bilingual schools, and collaborative healthcare research are already normalized. But here's what's being whispered more often now: Vermont's economic health is in question. An aging population, shrinking rural communities, and spiking healthcare costs are forcing residents to reconsider their future. In 2025, a grassroots campaign advocating dual allegiance grabbed headlines and sparked a broader conversation. If jobs are better, healthcare more affordable, and national values more aligned with Canadian ones, why stay tethered to a system that no longer serves them? Before we go further, hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep uncovering stories no one else is telling, and trust us, the next state on this list might be ready to cut ties completely. Number 8. Michigan. At first glance, Michigan appears sturdy, rooted in the auto industry, framed by the Great Lakes, and powered by a legacy of hard-working resilience. But beneath that solid surface, change is quietly taking shape. Michigan isn't just near Canada, it's deeply dependent on it. In 2024, trade between Michigan and Ontario topped $90 billion. Car parts, equipment, and finished vehicles cross seamlessly between Detroit and Windsor each day. Take Canada out of the equation, and Michigan's economy starts gasping for air. But here's the tension: Detroit is still clawing its way back from bankruptcy. Flint continues to wrestle with failing infrastructure. And many small towns in the Upper Peninsula are slowly withering, unable to bear rising costs. Public services are stretched thin, voters are frustrated, and all the while, just across the bridge, Canadians enjoy universal healthcare, stronger unions, and higher institutional trust. Michiganders are noticing. A regional poll in 2025 revealed that 33% of state residents believe tighter ties with Canada would serve their economy better than any federal aid from Washington. In places like Sault Ste. Marie and Port Huron, the idea of merging isn't a fringe joke anymore, it's a valid conversation. Could it happen tomorrow? Probably not. But the cultural seams are already fraying. Canadian radio fills homes in northern Michigan. Canadian flags fly at joint events. Some residents even drive north for cheaper prescriptions or faster medical attention. So here's the pressing question. If survival is increasingly tied to support from a neighboring country, how long before loyalty follows suit? Michigan has reinvented itself before. But this time, the gravitational pull from the north may be stronger than the roots anchoring it to the south. And the next state on this list? Its economic heartbeat is literally powered through Canadian infrastructure. You'll want to hear this. Number 7. Minnesota. Minnesota exudes stability, snowy winters, friendly accents, and lakes as far as the eye can see. But beneath that frosty exterior, the state is starting to lean northward. Minnesota is already stitched into Canada's economy. Lumber, grain, and electricity flow freely across the Manitoba border every day. In 2024, Minnesota exported over $700 million worth of timber, agricultural goods, and power services to Canada. But the lesser-known truth is that some northern towns in Minnesota depend more on Manitoba's energy grid and medical services than anything offered from the U.S. capital. And frustration is mounting. Health costs are spiraling, public services are stretched thin, and rural towns are fading. As national politics remain deeply divided, more Minnesotans are asking themselves, would our future look brighter if we aligned with a country that already shares our climate, values, and lifestyle? A 2025 university study revealed that over 40% of Twin Cities residents feel a stronger cultural connection to Canada than to other regions of the United States. That's not just surprising, it's telling. Some even refer to it as the Cascadia Drift, except it's not the Pacific Northwest. It's the north-central states now feeling the tug. Minnesota's high union membership, environmental ethos, and Scandinavian roots mirror Canadian norms more closely than those of southern or coastal American states. Many border communities already co-host festivals, participate in environmental initiatives, and share access to healthcare resources. This isn't just cooperation, it's interdependence. So when Minnesota's economy, identity, and political leanings are already woven into Canada's, what's really stopping a deeper realignment? Before we move to the next state, don't forget to subscribe. That's how we keep delivering stories that mainstream outlets aren't touching. And the next state? Its future may already be locked in by oil pipelines and a passport. Number 6. Washington. On paper, Washington state looks like the American dream, booming tech giants, green energy initiatives, and thriving coastal cities. But peer closer, and you'll find a state slowly being torn in two, and one side is already looking north for answers. Western Washington is globally connected, progressive, and deeply entwined with British Columbia. Vancouver and Seattle function almost like twin cities, sharing skilled labor, trade corridors, and even emergency coordination systems. In 2024, cross-border economic activity between Washington and Canada surpassed $50 billion. That's not just trade, that's reliance. But the real story lies in the divide. Eastern Washington, more agricultural and conservative, feels abandoned, struggling with water access, climate challenges, and political neglect. A movement to split the state has already gained traction. So the idea of looking toward Canada? It's gaining appeal, especially as corporations in Seattle begin to push for deeper ties. In 2025, tech giants like Microsoft and Amazon released a joint statement supporting binational infrastructure, trade harmonization, and cross-border mobility. Translation: they're preparing for a future where national boundaries may matter less than regional unity. Don't forget the Cascadia movement, a political and cultural vision that has quietly been growing for years. It champions sustainability, public health, and regional identity, suggesting British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon are more natural allies than Washington, D.C. ever was. Already functioning as one natural unit, this region is only becoming more unified as climate change reshapes coastlines and redefines fire zones. That sense of unity might soon outweigh traditional federal boundaries. So ask yourself this. When a state's largest cities are more economically and socially connected to Canada than to their own national capital, what does the future hold? It's not a rebellion, it's a reflection of reality. The loyalty of places like Washington might not flip overnight, But for many people in the Pacific Northwest, Canada doesn't feel like a foreign land. It feels like the future. In fact, some are starting to see it as the next state. Power grids, natural gas networks, and water systems are already intertwined with Canadian pipelines. And this trend? It's only becoming more surprising with each layer we uncover. Number 5. Alaska. Often seen as the final frontier, vast, wild, and proudly independent, Alaska carries the image of rugged self-reliance. But if you examine more closely, Alaska is subtly drifting toward Canada in more than just a geographical sense. Geographically isolated from the continental United States, Alaska's connections to Canada are not just practical, they're essential. Every single major highway that links Alaska to the rest of North America runs directly through British Columbia and the Yukon. Energy pipelines? Several already intersect Canadian infrastructure. And when it comes to supply chains, Alaska depends heavily on Canadian ports and railways. And it gets more complex. Alaska is facing a harsh economic reality. Over the last 10 years, oil revenues, its financial backbone, have dropped significantly. By 2025, the state is still grappling with serious challenges in funding basic public services, including education and emergency response systems in rural areas. At the same time, in many of Alaska's remote villages, goods and healthcare remain staggeringly expensive. In fact, some of those communities are physically closer to Canadian grocery stores and medical clinics than to services in Anchorage. And these aren't just geographical links, they're cultural too. Indigenous communities span both countries, and many feel stronger cultural ties to First Nations in British Columbia and the Yukon than to federal institutions in Washington, D.C. Now layer on climate change. Melting permafrost, crumbling coastlines, and the rapid disappearance of vital fisheries are reshaping Alaska faster than it can respond. Meanwhile, Canada is already investing in northern resilience, launching programs in Arctic towns, sharing research, resources, and strategies with their counterparts in Alaska. Which begs the question: if the lifelines, food, power, healthcare, even emergency help, are all coming from the north instead of from your own country, what message does that send? Quiet conversations about deeper cooperation are already underway. In 2025, a joint Arctic task force proposed the creation of a binational emergency corridor linking Whitehorse to Fairbanks. And according to some observers, that may just be the beginning. Before we move on, consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us continue bringing you the stories and realities that mainstream media often ignore. Because the next state? Its economy is so financially entangled with Canada, it may not be able to pull away even if it wanted to. Number 2. Minnesota. At first glance, it seems secure, home to the Twin Cities, major corporations, and thousands of sparkling lakes. But underneath the surface, Minnesota is deeply interwoven with Canada in ways many residents don't realize. As of 2025, Canada stands as Minnesota's top international trading partner, with over $12 billion in goods flowing across the border annually. And these aren't just economic numbers, they represent vital connections across industries like mining, timber, agriculture, and manufacturing. In the northern part of the state, some communities are closer, geographically and culturally, to Winnipeg than they are to Minneapolis. This proximity extends beyond maps. It's seen in business ties, local traditions, and cross-border family histories. One critical area is energy. Minnesota imports hydroelectric power directly from Manitoba Hydro, a source that supplies tens of thousands of homes while supporting Minnesota's transition to green energy. If that link were to falter, Minnesotans could face not just higher utility bills, but serious energy instability and even blackouts. Now consider the towns along the border. Entire local economies depend on Canadian tourism, fishing lodges, resorts, outdoor recreation, hunting expeditions. If the cross-border flow of tourists were disrupted, these communities wouldn't just struggle, many would vanish altogether. Meanwhile, rural Minnesota continues to face slow decline. Young people are leaving. Schools are merging. Hospitals and clinics are harder to access. The resulting vacuum is being quietly filled by northern neighbors, whether through commerce, education, or collaboration. For some, that Canadian connection isn't an alternative, it's the mainstay. At first glance, the state may appear strong and secure, but a closer look at its northern region reveals a different story. Economic momentum is already shifting toward Canada. Some local communities are actively collaborating with Canadian emergency services. In fact, several Minnesota-based businesses list their prices in Canadian dollars by default, reflecting where much of their customer base now resides. So, if political or financial instability ever sparks a turning point, if the U.S. retreats or fragments further, who would these towns along the border turn to for support? Minnesota may not be officially forming a Northern Alliance, but in many ways, it's already operating like one. And then there's the last state on this list. It's colder, resource-rich, and once part of the Canadian Empire. You'll be shocked to see just how close it is to coming full circle. Let's talk about number 1, Oregon. From the energetic streets of Portland to the mist-shrouded coastal forests, Oregon stands out as a symbol of innovation and natural charm. But peer beneath the surface. What secrets lie behind the postcard-perfect scenery? Oregon's economy is far more connected to Canada than many recognize. More than half of its timber exports head north, directly supporting Canada's booming lumber sector. On top of that, Canadian companies own vast areas of forested land in Oregon, meaning the state's natural wealth is already integrated into a larger, binational system. Should Canada change its regulatory stance or alter its ownership structures, Oregon's timber communities could be thrust into a sudden economic crisis. Another key connection lies in energy. Oregon relies heavily on Canadian hydroelectric power, which helps stabilize its power grid and maintain its green energy goals. A disruption in this supply wouldn't just raise electricity costs, it could plunge some already struggling rural regions into power shortages. But the ties don't stop there. Oregon's thriving tech industry is deeply dependent on Canadian talent and supply chains. Just across the border, Vancouver, British Columbia, provides thousands of highly skilled professionals who either relocate or regularly commute. The constant flow of trade and travelers between Oregon and Canada serves as a critical engine for job creation and economic growth. Meanwhile, many rural areas in Oregon, especially outside of Portland, are shrinking. Young people are leaving, either moving into urban centers or leaving the state altogether. Entire counties are now grappling with economic decline and shrinking populations, in a pattern that feels hauntingly similar to what's happening in small towns across Canada's side of the border. For these communities, Canada isn't just the neighbor next door, it's an essential part of their survival. So the question arises, could Oregon's destiny be shaped not solely by its place within the United States, but by its growing entanglement with the North? It's a question many avoid, but it may soon be unavoidable. The futures of these states are far more uncertain, and more connected to Canada, than anyone might have expected. If this gave you a new perspective, be sure to hit like, share it with others, and subscribe for more thought-provoking insights. Stay tuned, because what's coming next may completely reshape everything you thought you knew about America's borders.